They sent a termination email. No name, no thank you, no reason. But a month later, she received a letter from a law firm representing a massive corporation. They weren't asking for an apology. They were begging to speak with the legal owner of a system worth $500 million. And that person was her, the woman who had just eaten dry cereal from a mug in her unemployment-scented pajamas. I stared at the official letterhead, the embossed logo of Hardwick and Hoyt LLP, catching the morning light that streamed through my apartment's dusty blinds. My finger traced the heavy paper, feeling its weight, far more substantial than the flimsy email that had terminated my 15-year career at Ericsson Systems 4 weeks earlier. The letter's language was formal, urgent, laden with legal terminology that I understood just enough to recognize its importance. They wanted to meet with me, not as Melissa Grant, recently fired software engineer, but as Melissa Grant, patent holder of something they desperately needed. It was surreal. 4 weeks ago, I'd been escorted from the building by security, my belongings hastily stuffed into a cardboard box. Now a multinational corporation was practically begging for my attention. The irony was almost delicious enough to overpower the stale taste of discount cereal in my mouth. My name is Melissa Grant, and this is how I went from being fired to owning the one thing that would destroy my former CEO's career. The morning of my termination had been unremarkable. April in Denver is unpredictable. Snow one day, 70 degrees the next. That Tuesday had been crisp but sunny, the kind of day that usually energized me. I'd arrived at the Ericsson Systems building at my usual time, 7:45 a.m., early enough to settle in before the mandatory 9 a.m. stand-up meeting. I'd been a senior software engineer there for 15 years, having joined shortly after finishing my master's in computer science at Colorado State. Ericsson Systems had been my only real employer. I'd grown up professionally in those halls, evolving from an eager, somewhat naive programmer to a respected, if quiet, technical leader. I wasn't management material, by my own choice. I preferred solving complex problems to navigating office politics. My workspace reflected this. Meticulously organized, minimal decoration save for a small potted succulent and a framed photo of my parents at the Grand Canyon. That morning, I'd barely logged into my computer when the email arrived. Subject line: termination of employment. Effective immediately. No greeting, no personal address. Just cold, corporate language informing me that my position had been eliminated and that HR would facilitate my exit. No explanation. No acknowledgement of 15 years of dedicated service. Not even a perfunctory, thank you. 2 security guards appeared at my desk 5 minutes later. I was given 30 minutes to gather personal belongings under their watchful eyes. Former colleagues, people I'd collaborated with for years, averted their gaze as I was escorted through the open plan office. Nobody said goodbye. Nobody questioned why a senior engineer was being removed without warning. It wasn't until I was sitting in my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel, that I remembered the news that had been circulating for weeks. Ericsson was in final talks for a merger with Argosys, an international tech conglomerate. The deal was reportedly worth $500 million, a golden parachute for executives and major shareholders. Employees had been told to expect strategic restructuring, but assured that key technical talent would be retained. Apparently, I wasn't considered key talent. The weeks that followed blurred together. I applied for unemployment benefits. I updated my LinkedIn profile. I sent out resumes. At 43, I felt simultaneously overqualified and terrifyingly obsolete. The tech industry moved fast, and while I'd kept my skills current at Ericsson, I hadn't had to interview in 15 years. Each rejection email, or worse, the silence that followed most applications, chipped away at what remained of my professional confidence. My apartment, once just a place to sleep between workdays, became my prison. A 1-bedroom in a decent part of Denver that I'd chosen primarily for its proximity to the office. It now felt like a monument to a career I no longer had. I started sleeping later, showering less, eating whatever required minimal preparation, hence the dry cereal in coffee mugs. That was my state when the letter arrived. Unwashed hair, 3-day-old pajamas. Sitting cross-legged on my couch while scrolling mindlessly through job listings, I was increasingly convinced I'd never hear back from. The heavy envelope had been propped against my door when I reluctantly ventured out to check my mail, expecting nothing but bills and credit card offers. After reading it 3 times, I set it down and opened my laptop. Something wasn't adding up. The letter referenced a patent, US 9215343AX, Adaptive Cloud Resource Modulation, claiming I was its sole registered owner. But that couldn't be right. Any intellectual property I developed at Ericsson would belong to the company. That was standard in the employment contract I'd signed all those years ago. I typed the patent number into the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office's search engine, expecting to find some clerical error. Instead, there it was. My name listed as the primary inventor and sole assignee, not Ericsson Systems. Me, Melissa Ann Grant. The filing date was 5 years ago, around the time my mentor, Paul Benedict, had left the company under mysterious circumstances. Paul had been Ericsson's original chief architect, a brilliant, somewhat paranoid programmer who'd taken me under his wing when I was still green. He'd been pushed out during a leadership change when Travis Hume became CEO and brought in his own technical team. I remembered the project now. Paul and I had been working on an adaptive resource allocation system, something that could dramatically improve cloud computing efficiency. It had been Paul's brainchild, but he'd insisted I take the lead on implementing key components. "You've got the touch for this kind of architecture," he'd said. "Better than me, if I'm honest." What I didn't remember was filing a patent, but there it was, in black and white. And according to the official record, I owned it outright. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jamie, a former colleague from DevOps who was apparently still at Ericsson. "Holy shit, Mel. What did you do? Everyone's freaking out. Something about the core code base." I texted back, "No idea what you're talking about. Haven't done anything." "Jamie, the merger's off. Argosys pulled out this morning. Hume is on a rampage. Your name keeps coming up in emergency meetings." My heart raced. I pulled up a tech news site, and there it was. The headline, "Argosys Ericsson, 500mm merger collapses over IP dispute." The article was light on details, mentioning only that unexpected intellectual property complications had derailed the nearly completed deal. I closed my laptop and walked to my bedroom closet. Behind a stack of winter sweaters was an external hard drive I hadn't touched in years, my personal backup of projects I'd been particularly proud of. Paul had encouraged the practice, against company policy. "Always keep your best work," he'd said. "Not for them, for you." I plugged in the drive and searched for the Adaptive Resource Project. The folder was there, dated 5 years ago. I opened the main source code file and scrolled through, memories flooding back as I recognized my own programming style. Near the top of the file was a comment I'd apparently added. "Filed per Paul's advice. Better safe than sued." Sued. The word jumped out at me. Had Paul anticipated this moment? Had he somehow known that this particular piece of technology would become valuable enough to matter? I needed to talk to him. We'd fallen out of touch after he left. My loyalty to Ericsson making it awkward to maintain a friendship with someone who'd departed under a cloud. I searched for his contact information and found an old email address. I composed a message. "Paul, it's Melissa. Something strange is happening with that cloud resource system we built years ago. Apparently, I own the patent. Ericsson fired me a month ago, and now their merger is falling apart because of it. What's going on?" I hit send, not expecting an immediate response. Paul had moved to Arizona for what he called his strategic retirement. He talked about buying a small house in Sedona, disconnecting from technology except on his own terms. To my surprise, my phone rang 10 minutes later. Unknown number. "Melissa, I've been waiting for this call for 5 years." Paul's gravelly voice was instantly recognizable. "Paul, what's happening? I just got a letter from Hardwick and Hoyt, right? Argosys's attorneys?" He chuckled. "They found you faster than I expected." "How did you know who?" "Because I've been monitoring the situation. The merger was all over the tech press. The moment I saw Orexon was selling to Argosys, I knew it would come to this. He paused. Tell me they fired you first. A month ago, no explanation. He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years. Perfect, absolutely perfect. Hume just shot himself in both feet. Paul, I don't understand. Why is my name on this patent? How do I own it? Everything I developed at Orexon should belong to them. Should, yes, but not this. Remember when I had you sign those papers, right before I left? I vaguely recalled signing something in Paul's office, days before his departure was announced. He'd been unusually serious, insisting I read every page. You told me it was documentation for the project. I said. It was patent application documentation. With you as the primary inventor and assignee. But how is that possible? My employment contract had a loophole. One I helped write back when we founded the company. It required Orexon to file patents within 90 days of project completion or the rights reverted to the inventor. They got sloppy after I left. Never filed on your system. So I filed it myself. I don't remember doing that. You signed. I filed. Used my own money to push it through. Kept you as the sole owner. He paused. You trusted me. And I promised it would protect you someday. Today's that day. Melissa. I sank onto my couch, mind racing. But why would you do that? Because I saw what Hume was. What he'd do to the company I helped build. To the people who built it with me. His voice hardened. He pushed me out because I wouldn't compromise on engineering standards to meet his quarterly targets. I knew he'd eventually do the same to anyone with integrity. Like you. So this patent is your leverage, your power. The system you built, that we built, is apparently central to whatever Argosys wants from Orexon, and you own it outright. I stared at the letter again. What do I do now? You get professional help. This is beyond workplace drama. Melissa. This is high-stakes business negotiation. He was quiet for a moment. I know someone. A lawyer who specializes in intellectual property cases like this. Her name is Ariana Sloan. They call her the Falcon because of how she swoops in and tears apart tech companies who try to steal from individual inventors. I can't afford a high-powered attorney. Paul, I'm on unemployment. You can now. Trust me. Any IP lawyer would take this case on contingency. You're sitting on a gold mine. He paused. Let me call Ariana. I'll have her contact you. Just promise me one thing. What? Don't talk to anyone from Orexon or Argosys until you've spoken with her. Not a word, especially not Travis Hume. I doubt he even remembers my name, I said bitterly. Paul's laugh was cold. Oh, he knows it now. I guarantee it's being shouted in every executive office at Orexon headquarters. You're not their forgotten engineer anymore, Melissa. You're their existential crisis. After hanging up with Paul, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I showered, washed my hair, and put on real clothes. Then I sat at my small dining table and read through the patent documentation in detail, trying to understand exactly what I owned. The technology was more significant than I'd realized at the time. The adaptive cloud resource modulation system I'd designed allowed for dynamic, predictive allocation of computing resources based on usage patterns and demand forecasting. It was elegant, efficient, and apparently valuable enough to derail a $500 million merger. I was still absorbing this reality when my phone rang again. Another unknown number. Ms. Grant, this is Ariana Sloan. Paul Benedict suggested I call you regarding a patent matter. Her voice was precise, with the measured cadence of someone who charged by the hour and knew exactly what each minute was worth. Yes, thank you for calling, I said, suddenly conscious of how unprepared I was for this conversation. I understand you're the owner of US 9215343AX, which appears to be at the center of a significant corporate dispute. Is that correct? Apparently, yes, though I'm still trying to understand how. The how is less important right now than the what next, she interrupted. I've reviewed the publicly available information. Your patent is clearly a key component in the collapsed merger between Orexin Systems and Argosys. What's your objective in this situation, Ms. Grant? Her directness caught me off guard. I don't know. I was fired from Orexin a month ago. I just found out about this patent issue today. Were you given a reason for your termination? No, just a generic email about position elimination. Any severance? 2 weeks' pay. She made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a scoff. After 15 years, that's insulting. I heard keyboard clicks in the background. And this termination occurred approximately 2 weeks before the merger announcement? That's right. More typing. Ms. Grant, would you be able to meet with me tomorrow morning? I believe I can help you navigate this situation to your considerable advantage, but time is of the essence. I don't know if I can afford. Let's discuss compensation after we've met. For now, let's just say I'm intrigued by your case. She paused. And Paul Benedict is an old friend. He speaks very highly of you. We arranged to meet at her downtown Denver office the next morning. After the call ended, I sat in stunned silence for several minutes, trying to process the rapid transformation of my circumstances. 24 hours ago, I'd been a dejected, unemployed engineer eating cereal from a mug. Now I was apparently holding the key to a $500 million corporate transaction. My phone buzzed with another text from Jamie. Mel, are you behind this patent thing? Hume just fired 3 people from legal. He's saying someone sabotaged the merger. I didn't respond. Paul's warning about not communicating with anyone from Orexin echoed in my mind. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for news about the collapsed merger. The business press was full of speculation. Argosys' stock had dropped 3% on the announcement. Orexin, being privately held, didn't have public stock. But analysts were already questioning the company's future without the promised injection of Argosys cash. One article caught my eye. Sources close to the failed merger cite fundamental IP ownership issues as the deal breaker. Argosys reportedly discovered that a key technology component was not actually owned by Orexin Systems as previously represented. I was still absorbing this when my phone rang yet again. This time, the caller ID displayed a name that made my stomach clench. Travis Hume, CEO. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a text arrived from the same number. Melissa, this is Travis Hume. We need to talk ASAP about a misunderstanding. Please call me back at this number. It's extremely urgent. Misunderstanding. As if my ownership of a vital patent was some minor clerical error. As if he hadn't fired me without so much as a thank you for 15 years of service. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I forwarded the message to Ariana Sloan with a simple question. Should I respond to this? Her reply came within minutes. Absolutely not. Do not engage with anyone from Orexin in any way. Forward any communications to me, but do not respond. We'll discuss strategy tomorrow. As evening fell, more messages arrived. 2 from unknown executives whose names I vaguely recognized from company-wide emails. 1 from HR asking to clarify some details about your departure. Each time, I forwarded the message to Ariana without responding. At 9:38 p.m., a final text came through from Travis Hume. Melissa, I understand you might be upset about recent events. I'm prepared to offer you your position back with a significant promotion and compensation adjustment. Please call me to discuss. I stared at the message, a strange calm settling over me. After a month of feeling worthless, of questioning my value and my future. The desperate tone of his text was validating in a way I hadn't expected. I forwarded it to Ariana with a brief note. Getting interesting. Her response, indeed, get some rest, Ms. Grant. Tomorrow, we go to war. Ariana Sloan's office was located in a sleek downtown building with views of the mountains. Her firm occupied the entire 32nd floor, and the reception area alone was larger than my apartment. I felt underdressed in my best interview suit, which after weeks of unemployment was slightly more wrinkled than I would have liked. The receptionist showed me to a conference room where Ariana was already waiting. In person, She was younger than I'd expected, early 40s, perhaps. But her sharp gaze and perfectly tailored charcoal suit projected an authority that transcended age. "Ms. Grant," she said, rising to shake my hand. "Thank you for coming in. I've spent the morning reviewing your situation in detail. Please, call me Melissa." "Melissa." Then, she gestured for me to sit. "I've confirmed several key facts since we spoke. First, your patent is indeed valid and enforceable. Second, the technology it covers appears to be central to Orexon's core product offering, specifically, the cloud management system that made them an attractive acquisition target for Argosys." She slid a folder across the table. "These are printouts of internal Argosys communications that were included in an SEC filing this morning. Their CEO explicitly cites your technology as the key differentiator that justified the acquisition price." I opened the folder and skimmed the highlighted sections. Phrases like revolutionary resource optimization and potential 40% efficiency improvement jumped out at me. "How did you get these?" "They're public record now. Argosys is explaining to its shareholders why the deal collapsed." She smiled thinly. "What's interesting is that they're not blaming Orexon for misrepresentation. They're stating factually that the technology belongs to an independent third party. That's you." "So what does this mean for me?" Ariana leaned forward. "It means you have leverage, significant leverage. Orexon can't complete the merger without your patent. Argosys won't proceed without it. And from what I can gather, Orexon's current valuation is heavily dependent on technology they don't actually own. And Travis Hume knows this now. Oh, he more than knows it. He's legally exposed." Her eyes gleamed. "Did you know that Orexon has been representing your technology as their proprietary system for years? They've signed contracts with major clients guaranteeing they own all intellectual property in their solutions." I hadn't known that, but it made sense. Orexon had always been secretive about their contracts. So they've been selling something they don't own. Precisely. And in doing so, they've potentially committed fraud. She closed her laptop. "Which brings us to the question at hand. What do you want out of this situation, Melissa?" The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on understanding what was happening that I hadn't considered what outcome I desired. I don't know. Financial compensation, I suppose, for being fired unfairly." Ariana shook her head slightly. "Think bigger. You're not just an unfairly terminated employee seeking severance. You hold a patent that's central to a $500 million transaction. You have the power to approve or block that transaction. You have the power to demand licensing fees for past use of your technology. You have the power to negotiate directly with Argosys if you choose." The scope of possibilities began to dawn on me. "What would you advise?" "First, we formally notify Orexon that they're in violation of your patent rights and demand immediate cessation of any use of your technology. That establishes our position and puts them on notice. Won't that just antagonize them further?" "That's exactly what we want. Because the next step is to file for a preliminary injunction to prevent them from using your technology at all, which would effectively shut down their core systems." That seems extreme. It's a negotiating position, Melissa. Once they're facing an existential threat to their business, they'll be motivated to make a reasonable settlement offer. She paused. "Unless you'd prefer to be gentle with the company that discarded you without a second thought?" Put that way, the choice seemed clear. And what about Argosys? We make no direct contact yet. Let Orexon deal with their angry almost acquirer first, but we monitor the situation closely. Argosys may well decide it's simpler to deal with you directly than to salvage the merger. My phone buzzed, another text from Travis Hume. "Melissa, please be reasonable. This situation can be resolved to everyone's benefit. Call me." I showed it to Ariana, who smiled. "He's getting desperate." "Good." She checked her watch. "I've taken the liberty of drafting the initial legal notices. If you're comfortable proceeding, I can have them delivered to Orexon's legal department this afternoon." "That quickly?" In situations like this, momentum is critical. Every day we delay gives them time to develop counter strategies. She slid a document across the table. This is our representation agreement. My firm will take this case on contingency. 30% of any financial settlement or licensing arrangement we secure. I skimmed the document, the legal terminology mostly going over my head. This seems generous. It's standard for high-value IP cases, and frankly, I expect the outcome to be substantial enough that we'll both be very satisfied. She offered me a pen. Shall we proceed? I hesitated only briefly before signing. Whatever happened next, I knew I couldn't navigate it alone. And something about Ariana Sloane's confident efficiency was deeply reassuring. Excellent, she said, taking back the signed agreement. Now, let's discuss our specific demands. By the time I left Ariana's office 2 hours later, legal notices were already being delivered to Orexin, Argosys, and several other parties she deemed relevant. A preliminary injunction request was being prepared for filing the next morning, and I had authorized her to demand a minimum of $15 million for full transfer of the patent rights, a figure that had made me physically dizzy when she first suggested it. Remember, she'd said as I was leaving, that's our opening position. In reality, I expect we can secure significantly more, especially if Argosys enters the bidding directly. I stepped out onto the sunny downtown street, feeling as though I'd entered an alternate reality. A month ago, I'd been calculating how long my modest savings would last before I needed to consider downsizing my apartment. Now I was discussing settlements in the millions. My phone buzzed again as I reached my car. This time, it wasn't Travis Hume, but an unfamiliar number with an Atlanta area code, Argosys' headquarters. I forwarded it to Ariana without listening to the voicemail and drove home in a state of numb disbelief. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of legal maneuvers and increasingly frantic communications from Orexin. Travis Hume called 6 more times. The company's general counsel emailed, attempting to schedule a meeting. Even the CFO, a woman I'd only seen at company-wide presentations, tried to reach out through LinkedIn. Following Ariana's instructions, I forwarded everything without responding. Meanwhile, she kept me updated on developments. The preliminary injunction request had been filed. Formal cease and desist notices had been delivered. And most significantly, Argosys had reached out to her directly, expressing interest in exploring resolution options independent of the merger context. On the third morning, I was making coffee when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Travis Hume himself standing in my hallway, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. His custom suit was slightly rumpled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Melissa," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad I caught you at home. We really need to talk." I started to close the door. "My attorney has instructed me not to speak with you directly. Please contact Ariana Sloane if you—" He put his hand on the door. "Please, just 5 minutes. This has gotten completely out of hand. I'm sure we can work something out that benefits everyone." I remembered Ariana's advice about recording any unexpected communications. I discreetly pressed the voice memo button on my phone in my pocket. "Mr. Hume, I don't believe we have anything to discuss without our legal representatives present." His forced friendliness faded. "Look, I don't know what Benedict told you, but this vindictive approach isn't going to end well for anyone. The board is prepared to offer you a very generous settlement and your job back, with a promotion to principal engineer. You fired me without explanation after 15 years of service," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "Now you're at my door offering promotions because you've discovered I own something you need." "Business decisions are sometimes made with incomplete information," he said, his corporate speak so practiced it probably sounded reasonable to him. "The restructuring before the merger was handled by HR. I personally had no idea your position had been eliminated until after the fact." The lie was so blatant I almost laughed. "Mr. Hume, everyone knows you personally approve every termination at director level and above. You've bragged about it in company meetings." His expression hardened. "The point is, we're prepared to make this right. More than right. A signing bonus, stock options, a corner office. Just withdraw this absurd injunction request and reassign the patent to the company where it belongs. Where it belongs, I repeated. It belongs to me. That's legally established. And if Orexin has been representing otherwise to clients and partners for years, that's not my problem to fix. You developed that system while employed by Orexin, using company resources. The only reason you have that patent is because of some paperwork technicality that Benedict exploited on his way out. That technicality is company policy that predates your tenure as CEO, I said, remembering what Paul had told me. And the law doesn't recognize technicalities, it recognizes legal ownership, which, in this case, is mine. His facade of reasonableness cracked. Do you have any idea what you're doing? You're single-handedly destroying a company that employs over 300 people. People who were your colleagues, your friends. I didn't make the decision to fire me without cause right before a merger that depended on my intellectual property. I said, that was your decision, Mr. Hume, and now you're facing the consequences. His face flushed. This won't end well for you, Melissa. You think you have leverage now, but when this is over, you'll never work in this industry again. I'll personally make sure of it. I smiled, feeling a surge of confidence that would have been unimaginable weeks earlier. That sounds remarkably like a threat, Mr. Hume. I'm recording this conversation. By the way, I'm sure my attorney will be very interested to hear you threatening retribution. The color drained from his face. You're recording. Please direct all future communications through our respective legal representatives, I said, and closed the door firmly in his face. My hands were shaking as I called Ariana to report the encounter. She was delighted. This is perfect, she said after I played her the recording. He's handed us another weapon. We can now add intimidation and potential defamation to our complaints. She paused. But more importantly, his personal visit tells us they're desperate. The injunction request has them terrified. He said I'm destroying the company, I said, a flicker of doubt creeping in. There are people at Orexin who had nothing to do with my firing. Don't fall for emotional manipulation. Melissa. Orexin's potential difficulties are the result of their executives' decisions, not yours. You're simply enforcing your legal rights. Her voice softened slightly. But your concern for former colleagues speaks well of you. Perhaps we can structure any settlement to minimize impact on rank-and-file employees. Later that afternoon, Ariana called with news that shifted the dynamic dramatically. Argosys has requested a direct meeting with you, without Orexin's involvement. Their CEO wants to discuss, and I quote, acquisition of patent rights directly from the legitimate owner. They want to cut Orexin out entirely? It appears so. They've clearly decided it's simpler to deal with you than to salvage the merger with a company that misrepresented its intellectual property assets. She sounded pleased. This significantly strengthens our position. Now we have two potential buyers competing for your patent. Is that ethical? Legal? Absolutely. You're under no obligation to sell your intellectual property to Orexin specifically. You're free to negotiate with any interested party. She paused. I recommend we take this meeting. Having Argosys at the table creates useful competitive pressure. The meeting was scheduled for the following morning at Ariana's office. I spent the evening researching Argosys, trying to understand the company that now saw me as a potential business partner rather than a problem. They were substantially larger than Orexin, a publicly traded corporation with interests across cloud computing, enterprise software, and data analytics. Their market capitalization was over $20 billion, making the proposed $500 million acquisition of Orexin relatively minor in their overall portfolio. I slept poorly that night, my mind racing with possibilities and concerns. By morning, I was exhausted but too wired to feel it. I dressed carefully in my second-best suit, saving the best one for whatever came next, and arrived at Ariana's office 30 minutes early. She greeted me with unexpected news. Orexin has requested to join the meeting. They're quite insistent. Do we have to allow it? No, but I think we should. Having them in the room while Argosys makes its case could be advantageous. She smiled. Besides, I'm curious to see Travis Hume's face when he realizes he's lost control of the situation. Argosys's delegation arrived first. 3 people led by a tall woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to closing 9-figure deals. She introduced herself as Catherine Chen, Argosys's chief strategy officer. Ms. Grant, she said, shaking my hand firmly. I've heard a great deal about you and your impressive technology in the past week. All good things, I hope, I said, immediately feeling the inanity of the response. She smiled slightly. Mostly expressions of surprise that such a critical system wasn't properly secured by Orexin. Their loss, potentially our gain. The Orexin contingent arrived 5 minutes later, led by Travis Hume himself, along with the company's general counsel and another executive I didn't recognize. Travis's expression when he saw the Argosys team already seated was one of barely concealed fury. I understood this to be a settlement discussion between Orexin and Ms. Grant, he said stiffly. Actually, Ariana interjected smoothly, this is an exploratory meeting regarding the disposition of patent US 9215343AX, at which multiple interested parties are welcome. She gestured to the remaining seats. Please, join us. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone settled. Ariana took control immediately, outlining the purpose of the meeting and the current legal status of the patent dispute. Travis attempted to interrupt several times, but she firmly maintained control of the discussion. Now, she said finally, I believe Argosys has a proposal to present. Catherine Chen nodded and opened a sleek presentation folder. We've thoroughly analyzed the adaptive cloud resource modulation system covered by Ms. Grant's patent. Our technical team is extremely impressed with its elegance and efficiency. We believe it would integrate perfectly with our existing cloud management architecture. She slid a document across the table toward me. Argosys would like to offer $22 million for exclusive rights to the patent, with an additional consulting agreement for Ms. Grant to assist with integration. Travis Hume's face flushed deep red. This is outrageous. You can't simply bypass our existing agreement. What existing agreement? Catherine asked coolly. Your merger proposal was predicated on Orexin owning this technology. You don't. Ms. Grant does. We're simply approaching the actual owner directly. Orexin developed the underlying architecture, Travis insisted. The patent may technically be in Ms. Grant's name, but the core technology is inseparable from our systems. That's factually incorrect, I said, surprising myself by speaking up. The adaptive cloud resource modulation system was designed to be platform agnostic. It can be implemented in any cloud environment with minimal modification. Catherine nodded. Our engineers concluded the same after reviewing the patent documentation. Travis turned to me, barely contained rage in his eyes. After 15 years, this is how you repay the company that built your career? By selling our core technology to a competitor? I met his gaze steadily. The company that built my career fired me without explanation or proper severance after a decade and a half of service. 2 weeks before announcing a merger that would have made you personally millions. I kept my voice calm, professional. As for your core technology, the patent office and legal system disagree with that characterization. Ariana placed a gentle hand on my arm, a signal to let her take over. Mr. Hume, your company has been using my client's intellectual property without proper licensing for 5 years. During that time, you've represented to clients and partners that you own this technology outright. Those are serious legal issues that go beyond our current negotiation. Travis's attorney whispered something in his ear, and he visibly struggled to compose himself. Orexin is prepared to match Argosys's offer, he said finally. $22 million, plus reinstatement with promotion and a seat on the technical advisory board. Catherine Chen smiled thinly. $25 million, with the consulting agreement structured as a senior advisory position. No direct reporting relationships. Complete schedule flexibility, and a 3-year minimum term. The Orexin general counsel leaned toward Travis, whispering urgently. He shook his head slightly before addressing me again. 30 million. But the patent must be assigned to Orexin. The merger with Argosys can proceed as planned, and you'll receive a percentage of the final transaction value. I glanced at Ariana, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. This was playing out exactly as she had predicted, competing bids driving up the price far beyond our initial demand. Catherine Chen closed her folder. Ms. Grant, Argosys is not interested in acquiring Orexin systems without clear title to your patent. We are, however, very interested in acquiring the patent directly and bringing you into our technical leadership team. She paused. 35 million, exclusive rights, and a formal position as senior IP architect with our cloud services division. No relocation required. The room fell silent. Even Ariana looked impressed by the figure. Travis started to speak, but his attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm and whispered something that made him pale slightly. The message was clear. Orexin couldn't match that offer without jeopardizing their financial stability. Ariana broke the silence. These are both substantial offers that deserve careful consideration. Ms. Grant will need time to evaluate her options. She turned to me. Unless you have questions for either party? I had dozens, of course, but only one that really mattered in that moment. If Argosys acquires the patent directly, I asked Catherine, what happens to Orexin? She met my gaze directly. That would no longer be our concern. Our interest was in the technology, not the company structure around it. In other words, Orexin would be left to survive, or not, on its own, without the cash infusion the merger would have provided. I looked at Travis, whose expression had shifted from anger to something approaching panic. For a moment, I felt a twinge of empathy. He might be a heartless executive who had discarded me without a second thought. But there were hundreds of other employees at Orexin who didn't deserve to have their livelihoods threatened. Then I remembered Jamie's text about Travis firing people from the legal department when the patent issue emerged. How he'd blame-shifted and threatened rather than taking responsibility. How he'd shown up at my door making offers only when he realized his mistake. I turned back to Catherine. I appreciate both offers and will consider them carefully. But I do have one additional question for Argosys. What impact would your proposal have on current Orexin clients who depend on systems that use my technology? Catherine seemed mildly surprised by the question. We would naturally offer migration paths and support for any enterprise clients who wish to transition to Argosys solutions. Our primary interest is in the technology itself and its potential applications, not in disrupting existing business relationships. Ariana concluded the meeting shortly afterward, promising that we would respond to both offers within 48 hours. As the Argosys team departed, Travis made one last attempt to speak with me privately. But Ariana smoothly intercepted him. All further communications should continue through proper channels. Mr. Hume, she said, her polite tone belied by the steel in her eyes. Ms. Grant has nothing further to discuss without counsel present. When everyone had left, Ariana turned to me with an expression of barely contained satisfaction. That, she said, went even better than I anticipated. 35 million is well beyond what I expected, even in a competitive bidding situation. I felt strangely numb. It doesn't seem real. I assure you, it's very real. She guided me back to her office. Now we need to discuss your preferences. Both offers have advantages. Orexin's includes the potential for additional value from the merger, but comes with the complication of continuing to work with people who treated you poorly. Argosys offers a clean break and a prestigious position, but would likely mean the end of Orexin as you knew it. I sank into a chair, trying to process the magnitude of the decision before me. What would you advise? Professionally. The Argosys offer is clearly superior. The financial terms are better. And you'd be entering as a respected technical leader rather than as the employee who forced management's hand. She paused. But there are other considerations. You spent 15 years at Orexin. Despite recent events, You may feel some loyalty to the company or concern for former colleagues. I thought about the people I'd worked with, the engineers who'd collaborated with me on projects, the junior developers I'd mentored, even the administrative staff who'd always been kind. None of them had been responsible for my termination or the patent situation. Is there a third option? I asked finally. Ariana raised an eyebrow. What did you have in mind? Something that protects my interests but doesn't unnecessarily harm innocent people at Arexin. I paused, organizing my thoughts. Could we structure an agreement with Argosys that includes provisions for Arexin employees? Guaranteed interviews for anyone who loses their position if the company downsizes, for example? She considered this. Unusual, but not impossible. Argosys might be amenable if positioned as accessing a pool of pre-qualified talent familiar with the technology. She made a note. Any other conditions you'd want to include? I thought for a moment. I want control over my work. No arbitrary deadlines, no micromanagement, and I never want to be at the mercy of a single employer again. Those are reasonable terms for someone in your position. She smiled slightly. You're thinking like a consultant now, not an employee. That's appropriate given your new circumstances. We spent the next 2 hours outlining our response to both offers. In the end, we crafted a counter-proposal to Argosys that accepted their financial terms, but modified the employment structure to a consulting arrangement with more autonomy. We also included provisions for Arexan technical staff to receive priority consideration for positions at Argosys if they chose to leave their current employer. This protects you while offering a potential soft landing for your former colleagues, Ariana said, reviewing the final document. It's generous, perhaps more than they deserve, but it reflects well on you and costs you nothing. I left her office that evening with a strange mixture of emotions, vindication, anxiety, and a lingering disbelief that my life could change so dramatically in just a week. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Paul. Heard through the grapevine that today's meeting went well. Ariana says you were impressive. Drinks soon to celebrate? I smiled, realizing I hadn't properly thanked him for his foresight 5 years ago. Absolutely. I owe you more than drinks. You owe me nothing, he replied. Just enjoying watching Travis Hume reap what he sowed. Ariana called the next morning with news. Argosys has accepted our counter-proposal with minor modifications. They're actually quite pleased with the provisions for Arexan staff. Their HR director apparently sees it as an opportunity to acquire pre-vetted talent. And Arexan? I asked. No official response yet. Their general counsel requested a 24-hour extension to prepare a counteroffer. She paused. But unofficially, I'm hearing their board is in emergency sessions. There are rumors that several directors have called for Travis's resignation. A strange sense of calm settled over me. So, what happens now? We proceed with Argosys. The agreement could be finalized within a week. She hesitated. There is one other development. Travis Hume has been trying to reach you directly again. Multiple calls to your cell phone overnight. I checked my phone and found 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails, all from his number. Should I listen to the messages? Forward them to me first. I'll determine if there's anything relevant. She paused. Melissa, this is nearly over. Try to enjoy the moment. You've gone from being unfairly terminated to holding the winning hand in a multi-million-dollar negotiation. That's quite an achievement. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the morning light on the distant mountains. For the first time since my termination, I felt a sense of possibility rather than dread. Whatever came next would be on my terms, not dictated by quarterly targets or corporate restructuring. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Argosys had sent a draft agreement for my review, 57 pages of legal language that would transform me from an unemployed engineer to a multi-millionaire consultant. The reality of it finally began to sink in. I called Paul. It's happening. Argosys accepted our terms. Congratulations. His voice was warm with genuine pleasure. How does it feel? Surreal, validating, terrifying. I laughed. All of the above. Get used to it. This is just the beginning for you. He paused. Any word from Travis? Apparently, he's been trying to reach me. Ariana advised me not to engage. Smart woman. Whatever he wants, it can only harm you at this point. I could hear the smile in his voice. Besides, I suspect he'll be too busy cleaning out his office to bother you much longer. Later that day, Ariana forwarded an email from Orexen's general counsel. They were withdrawing from negotiations and would not be submitting a counteroffer. Reading between the lines, it appeared the board had decided to cut their losses rather than continue competing for a patent they couldn't afford. The final agreement with Argosys was signed 3 days later in their Denver satellite office. Catherine Chen flew in personally to welcome me to what she called a more appreciative corporate family. The signing ceremony was brief but momentous. My signature on the final page transferring exclusive rights to my patent in exchange for a wire transfer of $35 million and a 3-year consulting contract worth an additional $2 million annually. We're excited to see what you'll develop next, Catherine said as we shook hands. Your work on adaptive resource allocation is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we value at Argosys. As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. Confirmation that the funds had been received. The number in my account was so far beyond anything I'd ever expected to see that it didn't even seem real. I called Ariana. It's done. The money's in my account. Congratulations, she said warmly. You should be very proud of how you've handled this situation. Not everyone maintains their composure and strategic focus under similar circumstances. I had excellent guidance, I said. Your fee is well earned. I appreciate that, and I hope you'll consider me a resource if you need legal counsel in the future. She paused. One last piece of news you might find interesting. Orexen announced this morning that Travis Hume has resigned as CEO, effective immediately. The press release cites personal reasons, but industry sources are explicitly connecting it to the failed merger. I felt a complex mix of emotions, satisfaction, vindication, but no real joy at someone else's downfall, even someone who had treated me poorly. What happens to Orexen now? They're in a difficult position. Without the Argosys cash and without your technology, their core product offering is significantly compromised. They'll likely need to pivot or downsize substantially. She hesitated. If you're concerned about former colleagues, the provisions we negotiated with Argosys should provide some protection for the technical staff at least. After we hung up, I sat in my car for a long moment, processing the completion of this unexpected chapter in my life. My phone buzzed once more, a voicemail notification. Travis Hume again, perhaps making one last desperate appeal. I hovered my finger over the delete button, then hesitated. After a moment's consideration, I forwarded it to Paul without listening to it myself, with a simple message. We won. His response came a few minutes later. Indeed we did. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate. My treat. Though I suspect you could buy the restaurant now. 2 months later, I moved to San Diego, where Argosys had a growing technical campus with views of the Pacific. My consulting arrangement allowed me to set my own hours and work primarily from home, coming into the office only for specific collaborative sessions. My new business cards read, M. Grant, Strategic IP Architect, and my salary deposited automatically each month without the constant anxiety of performance reviews or reorganizations. I bought a modest but beautiful house in La Jolla with a portion of the patent settlement. Nothing ostentatious, I'd never been motivated by displays of wealth, but comfortable and peaceful. With a home office overlooking the ocean where I could work at my own pace on projects that genuinely interested me. Somewhat to my surprise, several former Orexen colleagues had taken advantage of the preferential hiring provisions in my agreement with Argosys. Jamie from DevOps was now working in Argosys's cloud infrastructure division. 2 senior engineers I'd respected had joined as technical advisors. Even my former administrative assistant had found a position in the San Diego office. None of them seemed to resent me for my role in Orexen's difficulties. If anything, they were grateful for the soft landing I'd negotiated. Travis had been driving the company into the ground for years. Jamie told me over coffee one morning. What happened with your patent was just the final straw. RX in itself was struggling. Without their flagship cloud management system, now replaced with a legally licensed Argosys solution, they'd lost major clients and had been forced to downsize dramatically. Industry analysts were predicting an eventual bankruptcy or fire sale acquisition. I felt a twinge of regret for the company where I'd spent so much of my career, but reminded myself that corporations weren't people. The people I'd cared about had largely landed on their feet. The executives who'd made poor decisions were facing the consequences of their choices. On a warm Tuesday morning, 6 months after the patent agreement, I sat on my deck with freshly brewed coffee made from beans I'd splurged on. A small luxury that still gave me disproportionate pleasure after weeks of unemployment and discount cereal. My laptop was open to a new project, a refinement of the adaptive resource system that promised even greater efficiencies. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, a video call with Catherine Chen to discuss potential applications for my latest work. Not a performance review or a demand for overtime, a collaborative discussion between respected professionals. As I gazed out at the sunlight sparkling on the Pacific, I thought about how dramatically my life had changed in less than a year. From being discarded without a second thought to being courted as a valuable technical partner. From unemployment to financial independence. The greatest change, though, wasn't in my bank account or job title. It was in how I viewed myself and my work. I was no longer just a cog in someone else's machine, subject to the whims of executives who saw technical staff as interchangeable resources. I was the architect of my own future, with the confidence and leverage to ensure my contributions were properly valued. I sipped my coffee, savoring both its rich flavor and the moment of quiet satisfaction. I had no regrets about how events had unfolded. Travis Hume and Orexin had made their choices, and I had made mine. The outcome spoke for itself. My phone buzzed again, a text from Paul, who was visiting San Diego for the weekend. Lunch today, I want to hear about this new project. Sounds like you're not done revolutionizing cloud computing. I smiled and typed back, absolutely. And this time, we'll file the patent properly from the start. Never underestimate the quiet one in the room, especially when they hold the patent you can't afford to buy.